sharing a speech called Let's Get Personal, that would be really a different speech than the one I prepared for you this evening. All right, everyone. Think back to the time when you were 18. Now, some of you are just barely past 18, so it won't be that hard to remember. But think about how 18-year-olds think, how teenagers think in general, how college students think in general. Think about your decision-making process, your lack of awareness about potential danger. Now imagine that you are 18, 9,000 miles away from home, and with a 7-week break ahead of you, with absolutely no obligations, and a pocket full of cash and a couple credit cards. You're 18. What kinds of decisions do you make, and where do you go? Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. In the intro, I had Sarah read a title of Teenage Adventures in Southeast Asia, but the subtitle could easily be Youthful Naivete Champions Over Certain Danger at the Hands of Nameless Hooligans, because that's about what happened. So I'd like to share with you what happened when my roommate and I, who were going to college in Japan at the time, took a 7-week break and traveled all throughout Southeast Asia. Just the two of us. I was 18, she was 19. Had no real clue what we were doing. Had a couple of guidebooks. We had looked for 6 weeks or so, making some plans. We had a plane ticket here or there to get from one part of the continent to the other. Other than that, it was all open. 7 weeks, pocket full of cash and some credit cards, 2 young teenage girls. So you can imagine that there was probably some adventure. To get from Japan, where we were going to school outside of Osaka, to mainland Asia, we were going to China, we decided we were going to take the cheapest possible route, because you're 18 and you want to save money, and what could possibly be wrong with the cheapest possible route? So we took a cargo ferry that was not designed for passengers over for $36. $36 to go from Japan all the way over to mainland China. But what it was a 26-hour, very rocky ride, and there were no chairs. It was more like a big open room like this, and everybody had a little narrow piece of space. And you all kind of felt like this is not the way that anybody who grew up in Minnesota is really supposed to travel. At least that's what it felt like at the time. It's not a way you sleep. A lot of people around you don't have sea legs, let's say. It's not a room that has real posh bathrooms. So it's definitely a challenge, even getting over to the continent. So we get to Shanghai, have a fabulous time for 3 days. We meet a couple of other friends there from the school, shopping, everything's great, fabulous, whatever. But the next part of our adventure needs to take us up to Beijing, which is a very, very, very long way, because of course China is much huger than you can imagine, or larger than you can imagine coming from here. So we decide again to take the cheapest way possible. Now you could fly and be there in a couple of hours, but no, because we're 18, we don't make very good decisions. You could take the train, but there's several classes of the train where you could travel at, say, A class or B class or C class. Well, we opted for what was effectively G class, which was where only the people who didn't have hardly any money to travel could be. So, mind you, again, 18-year-old, 19-year-old girl, don't speak any Chinese. We have our little chairs, little spaces, right? We can sit in our little space. And it was kind of like locusts, because everyone was really curious about us, so everyone would be in our face from all directions and talking and asking questions, and this goes on for 18 hours. Smoking in the train, and you can't even see through the train, and everybody's like this, talking to you, and looking at your stuff, and wanting to pick up your bag, and all kinds of stuff, because we were an oddity on the train, certainly. Tough to do that for longer than an hour or two and not be able to get any sleep, or not be able to get any space, or not be able to feel like you can get up and move. It was all really like kind of out of our element here. Could have maybe made a different decision. But needless to say, we did eventually arrive in Beijing, which is fantastic, fabulous, just so many great things to see. But here's where it gets a little dicey. After 7 days, we had to get out of Beijing to take a train down to Hong Kong. And we're in the train station. I want you to imagine a Walmart store that has absolutely nothing in it. It's a room that's just about that big inside this train station in Beijing. It's New Year's Eve. Beijing is really, really far north, so it's about 34 degrees. We came from Japan, wasn't that cold, weren't really dressed for that kind of stuff. Certainly hadn't packed our goodies when we bought stuff with jackets. We were buying all kinds of other trinkets. So we're in the train station, we know we have tickets, we're about to try to get onto our train. Once again, put yourself in the Walmart, completely empty, except for it is shoulder to shoulder with people. Shoulder to shoulder. All trying to funnel through this little thing that's maybe about as big as one of those doors to get to the section where you can board the train. And we're way back here, looking at all the people. That's when the suitcase throwing started. There were people who were trying to get further in line, so they would pick up their big Samsonite suitcases or whatever they were and throw them ahead so that they had an excuse to go after their suitcase and get farther up in line. Needless to say, we were a little out of our element. So here it is, New Year's Eve, and we miss our train out to Hong Kong. Well, the train station doesn't close at night, but everything else does. Every other possible business, every place where you might ask questions, get help, any kind of thing like that. So here we are, we've just loaded up on hundreds of dollars worth of goodies in Shanghai. Big, huge backpacks and rolling things that don't really roll well because it was $4 and all kinds of other stuff. And we are stuck in the outer perimeter of the train station. Everything's closed. It's now 10:30 at night on New Year's Eve. 34 degrees out. And that's how we spent the night, with people walking by and asking us questions, and couldn't help them, couldn't answer questions, all kinds of stuff. So there was potentially some hooligans that we could have run across there, but needless to say, it was completely safe. We did find out the next day, lo and behold, there's a whole different line for foreigners to go through that has like 6 people in it and 3 attendants. We weren't supposed to be in the big Walmart filled room and whatever, but you win some, you lose some. So we did eventually make it to Hong Kong. Had a amazing, fantastic time in Hong Kong, but I want to tell you just one more adventure about potential hooligans, because this one's my favorite. Hong Kong, there's a lot of beautiful places to stay, of course, but we chose to stay in the Chungking Mansion. Why the Chungking Mansion, you ask? Because it was $4 a night. And we wanted to save all of our resources. So Stephanie and I decided we're going to stay in the Chungking Mansion. Now this is the place where you walk in to, it's just like walking into a very unsavory mall. And you stand in front of the elevators, and the whole time you're thinking, I can't get on this elevator, this isn't safe. And you go up to your room, rickety crackety elevator, and in our room there was frogs, spiders, mice, cockroaches, and something else. Now I can't remember what the 5th thing was, but it was really scary. There was no lock on the door, and if there was ever a fire trap, that was it. So not only did we survive the Chungking Mansion, but 3 months later when I went back to Hong Kong on a bonus trip, I stayed there again by myself with someone I didn't know in the room, because it was $3 to stay with someone else. So I just want to share with you that take all the adventures you can take. I'm going to ask these gentlemen to hold this up for just a second in closing. My mom did this for me. She took all the things that I had when I was gone, all these little t-shirts and stuff like that. That's my Great Wall shirt. This is my I Survived China t-shirt. This is my I Climbed the Great Wall shirt. This is from Thailand, that's from China, that's from Thailand down here, and we just had a fantastic time. So I just want to tell you, if you can take adventures, do it, even if you have to outsmart the hooligans.